Hi everybody, this is Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au, bringing you my regular weekly feature, The War on Misinformation, trying to put some truth into some of the misinformation that abounds in mainstream media about residential real estate and related issues. And normally, recently anyway, the biggest complaint that we have had in terms of mainstream media, our major newspapers, the ABC, etc., is extraordinarily unreasonable negativity about housing markets across Australia. Right now, I want to talk about something which is actually at the extreme opposite end of the media spectrum. It's an instance where major media has been screaming about a new housing boom in circumstances where it's very dangerous for anyone who might believe what they're reading. So what I'm referring to is the recent Queensland State Government approvals giving apparently the go-ahead for the much publicised, very controversial and totally unnecessary Adani coal mine. And as a result of the State Government approvals, it appears that project can now go ahead and start construction, even though it also appears that they still have some federal regulatory hurdles to get over. But in major News Limited publications, that's News Limited that publishes The Australian, the Courier Mail in Brisbane, the Herald in Melbourne, etc. We saw headlines like Adani impact, mining towns on cusp of a housing boom. And if you read the story, it says, after years of poor property price growth, cities like Gladstone, Rockingham and Emerald are poised to become an investor's paradise, following the state government's decision to give the green light for the Adani coal mine in the Galilee Basin. Home prices also in towns like Bowen, Longreach and Moranbah could be on the cusp of a major rebound, with work on the Carmichael coal mine set to start immediately. Now, if you read the article, there's actually nothing in the article that actually substantiates the idea that the approval of this mine is going to lead to a housing boom in certain locations that happen to be proximate to it. In fact, when they actually do quote some, they quoted somebody from CoreLogic later in the article, which actually didn't support that notion at all. They were being very, very cautious, saying it was really, really hard to say whether that's actually going to precipitate the investor's paradise that the article started by referring to. So it was without any substance, and I just think it's very, very dangerous. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of property investors from around Australia who have been suffering financially for the last 5 or 6 years because they had previously bought in some of these places when the resources investment boom was on and prices were very high, and they've dropped massively since then. And so there's been a lot of financial pain caused by investing in these places. They're very much boom bust sort of locations. Any location that is wholly and solely reliant on the resources sector for its economy and for the rise or fall of its property market is very, very high risk. It's at the extreme danger end of the risk spectrum for property investors, but now more so than ever before. Now, just to give you some examples of what has happened and what I think is likely to happen or not happen as a result of some of these major mining projects getting the go-ahead. In simple terms, what I'm suggesting is the days of housing booms in towns close to major mining projects are gone for reasons that I'll explain. But Moranbah is a classic example. It's the greatest boom bust story in the history of Australian real estate, probably. It's a small town, a coal mining town in central Queensland, near the Bowen Basin, where there are in existence a number of major coal mines. Now, going back more than 5 or 6 years, Moranbah went through a 10-year period where its median house price rose from about $50,000 to $750,000. It went that high. Very ordinary houses were selling commonly for $750,000 in this town because of the mining boom. Its average annual growth rate in its median price over 10 years was 30%. That's 30% per year. So probably the most remarkable boom period any location ever in Australia. Rents were common around $1,500 per week. So the rental returns were also very high. But what happened was that the mining companies who were sort of paying these rents and buying houses at these exorbitant prices got very tired of that and decided there's got to be a better way than paying these extortionate type rentals and prices in towns like Moranbah. So they came up with a new model, which was fly in, fly out workers. And when the workers fly in to work their shift at the mining operation, they were accommodated in temporary workers camps that were set up by the mining company. So no longer were they renting in nearby towns like Moranbah, no longer were they buying houses in nearby towns like Moranbah. So while the mining boom was still going on, prices and rents were falling because vacancies were rising. And we saw that happen in Gladstone. And it was a combination of a couple of factors. Gladstone should have had the mother of all housing booms going back to about 2011, 12, 13 and onwards, because there were 3 massive gas projects being built in Gladstone, totaling investment of $60 billion, tens of thousands of workers coming into work on those projects. Developers just flooded Gladstone with new product, assuming there was going to be massive demand for rentals and for people buying real estate. But what wasn't understood until it was too late was that most of those workers weren't going to be renting or buying local houses or apartments. They were going to be staying in the temporary accommodation camps set up by the mining companies. So while Gladstone was having the mother of all economic booms, its property market was diving because there was massive oversupply. Vacancies rose, rentals fell, and prices followed. The same things happened in the Surat Basin area of Queensland. Towns like Chinchilla and Dalby, Roma, Miles all suffered from the same syndrome. And then over in Western Australia, Port Hedland, Karratha. At one point, the median house price for Port Hedland was $1.2 million for a very ordinary 3-bedroom house. At the peak of the mining investment boom, and more recently it's been closer to 200,000. So there's been just absolutely massive decline in values in those sorts of locations. Newman had a very similar syndrome to places like Gladstone and Moranbah. Gina Reinhardt, allegedly our richest woman in Australia, was building a new $10 billion coal mine near Newman out in the Pilbara region. While that was going on, the Pilbara property market was falling into a very steep downturn because the workers on that project weren't staying in the town of Newman. They were staying in the temporary accommodation. They were flown in a temporary airstrip and they stayed in the accommodation camps while they're working on that project. So that's the new norm. That's the new modus operandi. So the fact that this Adani coal mine, apparently massive mine, creating apparently thousands and thousands of new jobs, if you can believe the Adani figures, and you probably can't. But where are they going to be accommodated? They're unlikely. This is unlikely to precipitate a new boom in places like Moranbah or whatever other towns there are out there. There is a recovery happening in some of those places that died previously. Emerald, one of the bigger towns in the Galilee Basin, Bowen Basin region, quite an important sort of regional centre with an airport, etc. Demand in that market is on the way back, and prices starting to rise again from a very low base because they dropped a lot. Towns like Blackwater on the way back. Moranbah itself has started to rise again, but still a long, long way from those peak values of 750,000 median. But it's unlikely they'll ever get back to those levels, and we're not going to see a new boom as a result of this mine. It's very important to understand that, because we're starting to see this hype in media about property booms, and they haven't understood how much things have changed. Now, if you do want to invest in areas where you might get some spin-off benefit from these major mining projects, there's no doubt that the resources sector in Queensland and Western Australia is coming back. You're much better advised to be looking at some of the larger regional centres, the regional cities that are proximate and will get some spin-off benefit. Maybe we'll be providing some of the workforce that will be going out to work in those mining projects, but they're not actually mining towns, and there's more diversity to the economy. Now, Mackay is one that stands out, and Townsville is. Now, Townsville is going to be the corporate headquarters for that big coal mining project that everyone's talking about. Mackay is quite close to it in terms of geography. It's got a major export close by, export port close by, etc., etc. Now, those locations are featured in our new edition of the regional top 10 regional hotspots report, which we published earlier this week. Towns from Mackay both in it for all sorts of reasons, not just because of this one project. We like the greater diversity in those economies, and the fact that these markets are rising or poised to rise for their own inherent reasons. But certainly I urge you to be very cautious about believing some of the headlines we're now starting to see about housing booms and what they called an investor's paradise. It's really quite the opposite. It's more like a fool's paradise than an investor's paradise, so please be warned. Now, if you do have a plan or trying to develop a plan about investment in property, and you're wondering about that kind of thing that you're reading about, or anything else that you're planning to do or thinking of doing, now is a very good time to be booking in a strategy session with us so that you can have a one-on-one discussion with myself. Because it's June, we have a special end of financial year offer on that strategy session where you get to have a one-on-one chat, usually via Skype or Zoom, and you can talk to me about what you're planning to do and get some feedback. So we have very good knowledge of markets right around the country here, and can give you some opinions about what you're planning to do or help to point you in the right direction. And if you're thinking of buying in a coal mining town, we can warn you that it's probably not the smartest thing you'll ever do. Okay, that's it for now. Terry Ryder signing off from this week's edition of The War on Misinformation. Let's do it again soon. Bye for now.